Captain Marcus Blackwood struggled against the metallic restraints cutting into his wrists as two Austrian guards dragged him down the polished corridor of the Imperial warship. Blood trickled from the gash above his eye, a souvenir from the ambush that had decimated his reconnaissance team on Viridia's surface. "Keep still, human," hissed the taller guard, jabbing a pronged weapon into Marcus's side. The electric pulse sent pain radiating through his torso, but he refused to cry out. 3 days in Austrian captivity had taught him that showing weakness only invited more torment. The guards halted before an ornate door etched with what appeared to be battle scenes, Austrian victories, no doubt. Marcus steeled himself as the door slid open to reveal a spacious chamber. Compared to the holding cell where he'd spent the past 72 hours, this room resembled a palace, with star charts projected across the ceiling and strange crystalline sculptures glimmering in recessed alcoves. At the center of the room stood a figure studying a three-dimensional tactical display. "The human prisoner as requested, General Kresh," announced the guard, shoving Marcus forward until he stumbled to his knees. General Valora Kresh turned, and Marcus felt his breath catch despite himself. She was tall, even for an Austrian, with skin the color of burnished copper laced with luminescent blue markings that followed the contours of her face. Her eyes, completely black except for pinpoints of amber light, assessed him coldly. Unlike the other Austrians Marcus had encountered, whose crests of rigid cartilage extended backward from their skulls, hers was adorned with precious metals that clinked softly as she approached. "So this is the human who led the infiltration of our research facility," she said, her voice surprisingly melodious despite the undertone of menace. "The one who killed Commander Thax before being captured." Marcus said nothing, meeting her gaze steadily. "Grand Admiral Zevros thought you might appreciate this trophy, General," said the second guard. "Considering it was your defense systems the humans were attempting to compromise." Valora circled Marcus slowly. "Does it speak our language?" she asked, as if he were an animal. "I speak 7 languages," Marcus replied in perfect Austrian, his voice raspy from thirst. "Including the high dialect you're currently butchering with your frontier accent." The guard moved to strike him, but Valora raised a hand, stopping the blow mid-air. Her expression revealed a flash of surprise, quickly masked by amusement. "Interesting. The intelligence reports suggested humans were primitive, but this one appears to have received some education." She leaned closer, the scent of something like ozone and exotic spice filling Marcus's nostrils. "Tell me, human, do you know what happens to war prizes in the Austrian Empire? I imagine you'll mount my head on your wall alongside the other evidence of your brutality." Valora laughed, the sound like shards of glass. "Oh no, Captain Blackwood, is it? Your value is in your living mind, not your dead flesh." She touched his face, her fingers unnaturally warm against his skin. "The neural extractors will transfer everything you know directly to our war databases. Then perhaps I'll keep what remains as a curiosity." Marcus jerked away from her touch. "I'll die before I give you anything. Your cooperation is unnecessary. The process is quite thorough, if somewhat destructive to the subject." She straightened and addressed the guards. "Have him cleaned and medically examined. I want him functional for the extraction tomorrow." "Yes, General." As the guards moved to retrieve him, Marcus lunged unexpectedly, his shoulder connecting with Valora's midsection. She stumbled back, more in surprise than pain, as Marcus rolled and came up with her ceremonial dagger in his bound hands. The room froze in tableau. The guard stood paralyzed. To interfere in what was now a personal confrontation would dishonor their general. Valora's eyes narrowed, but the corners of her mouth curled upward. "You continue to surprise me, human." She made no move toward the weapons clearly visible at her hip. "Call me Marcus," he said, brandishing the dagger. "If we're going to be spending time together, we should be properly introduced." Instead of calling for reinforcements, Valora did something utterly unexpected. She laughed, a genuine sound, devoid of the earlier malice. Very well, Marcus. Consider this your first lesson in Astrian culture. You've issued a challenge by taking my ceremonial blade. She slipped off her outer jacket, revealing lithe, muscular arms marked with the same blue patterns. If you can draw blood, I'll grant you one request within reason. If you fail. She shrugged eloquently. Marcus knew it was suicide, but suicide on his terms was better than having his mind torn apart by Astrian technology. He lunged forward, blade extended, only to find himself suddenly airborne, then crashing onto his back with Valoris' knee pressed against his throat. Disappointing, she murmured, reclaiming her dagger. Then, to his guards, cancel the extraction. This one has spirit worth observing. Prepare the adjunct quarters instead. As Marcus was hauled to his feet, dazed and confused by this turn of events, Valora caught his gaze. Consider yourself fortunate, Marcus Blackwood. I've just promoted you from war prize to personal project. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we begin your true education in what it means to belong to an Astrian general. After 2 weeks in General Valora Kresha's adjunct quarters, a glorified cell connected to her personal chambers, Marcus had developed a routine. Each morning, he would wake to find fresh clothing in the Astrian military style but modified for human physiology. He would then be escorted to Valora's strategic command center where he sat silently as she conducted the business of war. Today was different. When the door slid open, Valora herself stood in the entrance, not the usual guard. You're to accompany me to the War Council, she announced, tossing him a more formal version of his usual attire. The High Command is curious about my unusual pet. Marcus caught the clothing with one hand. I'm not your pet. No? Valoris' lips curled into that now familiar half-smile. Then what would you call yourself, Captain Blackwood? A prisoner of war entitled to certain rights under interstellar conventions. Valora laughed. Rights? You're lucky I find your defiance entertaining rather than tiresome. She stepped closer, adjusting the collar of his shirt with unsettling intimacy. Remember, today you represent me before my peers. Embarrass me, and your accommodations will become significantly less comfortable. Marcus held her gaze. And if I cooperate? Then perhaps I'll grant you access to the information banks you've been asking about. She stepped back. I know you're collecting data, Marcus. Your eyes miss nothing. I'm curious what you hope to accomplish. The journey to the council chambers took them through the heart of the Astrian warship Inexorable, a massive vessel that served as the command center for their frontier fleet. Marcus catalogued everything: security protocols, officer rotations, weapon systems. Information that might prove useful if escape ever became possible. The War Council was held in a vast circular chamber. 7 high-ranking Astrians sat around a holographic display showing star systems Marcus recognized as the contested border worlds. His stomach churned as he recognized the planet Helios, home to over 2 million human colonists. Valora guided him to stand behind her position at the table. The other generals eyed him with mixtures of disgust, curiosity, and in one case, unnerving hunger. Valora, your pet is distracting, growled Admiral Drav, his facial markings pulsing with annoyance. This council discusses classified strategy. My adjunct's presence is precisely the point, Valora replied smoothly. He provides valuable insight into human psychology. Know your enemy, Admiral. Another general, her crest adorned with jagged metal, leaned forward. Has the extraction been performed? His knowledge of coalition defense systems would be valuable for our Helios campaign. I've found conventional interrogation more productive, Valora said. The extraction process destroys too many subtle contextual details. Marcus kept his expression neutral despite the anxiety flooding his system. Helios was clearly their next target, and from the holographic display, the attack would come through the Vega corridor, Helios's blind spot. For the next hour, he listened as the Astrians finalized their invasion plans. Millions would die if the coalition wasn't warned. When Valora was drawn into a heated argument with Admiral Drav, Marcus noticed a data terminal within reach. Maintaining an expression of bored indifference, he edged closer, fingers brushing the interface. 3 quick commands, memorized during his observations of Valoris work patterns, would send an encrypted warning burst to coalition forces. His fingers flew across the interface, but before he could complete the 3rd command, a hand closed around his wrist like an iron vice. Curious about Astrian technology, Marcus? Valoris' voice was silk over steel, her grip painful. The council had fallen silent. Admiral Drav stood, rage evident in his stance. This proves my point. The human tried to access our systems. Execute it immediately. Valoris' expression remained calm. My adjunct was simply bored. A trait humans share with Astrian children. She twisted Marcus's arm slightly, enough to make him wince. But disobedience must be addressed. Later, back in her chambers, Valora slammed Marcus against the wall. You foolish, reckless human. Do you know what they wanted to do to you? Kill me? Marcus suggested, tasting blood from where his lip had split. Better than watching you plan genocide. Genocide? Valoris' eyes flashed. We're targeting military installations, not civilians. I saw the projections. Your precision strikes will cause atmospheric chain reactions. Millions will die. Something flickered across Valoris' face, doubt, perhaps. She released him and stepped back. How would you know that? Because we've studied Astrian weapons capabilities. Your plasma bombardment doesn't just destroy targets, it poisons worlds. Valora turned away, moving to her console. You tried to warn them, didn't you? That's why you accessed the terminal. Marcus saw no point in denying it. Yes. To his surprise, she didn't summon guards or punish him further. Instead, she brought up the Helios attack plans and studied them in silence. Finally, she spoke without looking at him. You saved my life once. During the extraction debate last week. Marcus frowned. What are you talking about? The tea served to me was poisoned. I saw you notice the discoloration and switch our cups when you thought I wasn't looking. She turned to face him. Why would you do that if we're such monsters? The question caught him off guard. He had indeed switched their cups, acting on instinct when he noticed the chemical reaction with the metal spoon. One life against millions doesn't balance the scales, he said finally. Valora stepped closer, studying him with those unsettling amber-flecked eyes. No. But it proves you judge individuals, not species. Her hand reached up, fingers brushing his split lip with surprising gentleness. Perhaps we're not so different, you and I. We're nothing alike, Marcus insisted, ignoring the unexpected warmth of her touch. Aren't we? Both soldiers. Both loyal to our people. Both willing to die for what we believe. Her face was inches from his now. And both too stubborn to admit when we're wrong. Marcus felt the atmosphere between them shift dangerously. The power games they'd been playing for weeks had taken on a new dimension, one neither of them had anticipated. I'm still your prisoner, he reminded her, his voice lower than intended. Yes, she agreed, her breath warm against his face. But I'm beginning to wonder which of us is truly captive. She stepped back abruptly, composing herself. The council reconvenes tomorrow to finalize the Helios attack. I expect your insights on potential coalition countermeasures. You know I won't help you kill my people. Valora paused at the door. Then convince me there's a better way, Marcus. That's your challenge. She leveled her gaze at him. Because if you can't, Helios burns in 3 days. Marcus paced his quarters, mind racing. Valora had given him an impossible task: convince her to spare Helios without revealing Coalition weaknesses. He had less than 10 hours before the Council reconvened. His door slid open without warning. Valora entered, dressed not in her usual military uniform but in more casual attire that accentuated her lithe physique. "Come," she commanded. "We're going somewhere private." "Am I allowed to ask where?" "My personal vessel. The walls on the inexorable have ears, especially now." She handed him a small device. "Put this on your wrist. It's a localized translator that will help you understand certain Astrian technical terms." Marcus raised an eyebrow but complied. "Suddenly concerned with my comprehension?" "Suddenly concerned with accurate communication," she corrected. "What we discuss next requires precision." Her personal shuttle was sleek and clearly customized for stealth. Once aboard, Valora activated a series of security protocols before setting course away from the main fleet. "Are we escaping?" Marcus asked, only half joking. "Temporarily." She guided the craft into the shadow of a nearby moon. "This is the only place I can be certain we're not being monitored." Once stationary, she turned to him. "You were right about the atmospheric chain reactions. I've reviewed the data thoroughly." The admission startled him. "Then you'll stop the attack?" "It's not that simple. The High Command is committed to neutralizing Helios as a strategic outpost. If I object without an alternative, I'll be replaced by someone who won't hesitate. So we're here to find an alternative that satisfies your bloodlust while minimizing the body count?" Marcus couldn't keep the bitterness from his voice. "We're here because I want to understand why you care so much," Valora countered. "Helios isn't your homeworld. According to your service record, you've never even been stationed there." Marcus stilled. "How do you know my service record?" "The same way I know you were born on Earth's northern continent, graduated top of your class in the Coalition Academy, and lost your parents in the Astrian raid on Proxima Station." Her expression softened fractionally. "I know my enemy, Marcus." The mention of his parents sent a spike of old pain through his chest. "Then you know why I fight." "I know what propaganda tells you to believe," she corrected. "Just as you only know what your coalition says about us." She activated a holographic display. "This is why we target Helios." The image showed a massive facility built into Helios's largest mountain range. Coalition records call this a terraforming research center. Our intelligence shows it's developing a bioweapon specifically engineered to target Astrian physiology. Marcus stared at the evidence, recognizing classified details that confirmed its authenticity. "This can't be right. The Coalition doesn't develop bioweapons. Just as Astrians don't target civilians." Valora's voice was soft but cutting. "Every civilization has its public principles and its shadow operations." For hours, they exchanged information, verified intelligence that neither side officially acknowledged. Marcus found himself questioning certainties he'd held for years, while Valora seemed equally disturbed by revelations about Astrian military conduct. "There has to be a surgical option," Marcus finally said, examining the facility schematics. "A targeted strike on this section would neutralize the bioweapon research without triggering atmospheric devastation." Valora studied his suggestion. "Possible, but it would require precise coordinates and timing. Information only someone with coalition clearance could provide." The unspoken question hung between them. "You're asking me to betray my people," Marcus said quietly. "I'm asking you to save millions of lives on both sides," she corrected. "This bioweapon would lead to full-scale war, not the limited border conflicts we've had so far." Before Marcus could respond, proximity alarms blared. Valora lunged for the controls. "We've been tracked." The view screen showed an Astrian hunter-class vessel approaching rapidly. "Admiral Drav," Valora snarled. "He's been waiting for an opportunity to undermine me." The comm system crackled. General Kresh, you are ordered to surrender your vessel and the human prisoner for immediate inspection. Your actions constitute potential treason against the Empire. Valora's fingers flew across the controls, preparing evasive maneuvers. If they capture us, you'll face extraction and I'll be court-martialed. Can we outrun them? Not for long. Their weapon systems outclass this shuttle. She looked at him, decision made. I need you to trust me. Before Marcus could respond, she pulled the shuttle into a steep dive toward the moon's surface. The pursuing vessel fired warning shots that rocked their small craft. They won't risk killing a general, she explained, but they'll disable us if they can. She pointed to an auxiliary control panel. Take the defensive systems. You're a pilot, prove it. Marcus hesitated only a second before sliding into the seat. The controls were different, but the principles were universal. He activated the shuttle's countermeasures, timing them to confuse the hunter's targeting systems. They skimmed the moon's barren landscape, weaving between cragged formations as energy blasts struck nearby. A lucky shot clipped their engine housing, sending them spinning. Marcus felt blood trickling down his forehead as Valora fought for control. We're going down, she warned, voice remarkably calm. Brace for impact. The crash was violent but survivable thanks to Valora's piloting skills. Emergency systems bathed the cabin in dim red light as dust settled around them. Status? Valora asked, unfastening her restraints. Marcus ran a quick systems check. Life support functioning. Communications dead. They'll be landing soon to confirm the kill. Valora retrieved emergency supplies, including weapons. She hesitated before handing Marcus a plasma pistol. I'm trusting you with this. Don't make me regret it. The significance wasn't lost on him. Why? I could turn it on you the moment we're clear. Because we won't survive this without trusting each other, she said simply. They evacuated the shuttle moments before Drav's forces surrounded it. Hidden among the rocks, they watched as troops searched the wreckage. This way, Valora whispered, leading him toward a narrow canyon. There's an old mining outpost beyond that ridge. If we can reach it, there might be a long-range communicator. They moved silently through the lunar landscape, acutely aware of pursuit closing in. When a patrol appeared suddenly before them, Marcus reacted first, tackling Valora behind an outcropping as energy blasts scorched the ground where they'd stood. Their bodies pressed together in the cramped space, faces inches apart. Marcus became acutely aware of her warmth, the subtle glow of her skin markings pulsing with her accelerated heartbeat. That's twice you've saved me, she whispered. Don't read too much into it, he replied, but there was no conviction in his voice. Something changed in her expression, a softening, a vulnerability he'd never seen before. In another life, another time. Marcus felt himself drawn toward her, reason surrendering to something more primal. Their lips met in a desperate, hungry kiss that seemed to channel all the tension, all the conflict that had defined their relationship until this moment. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Valora stared at him with wonder and confusion. This changes nothing, she said, but her voice trembled slightly. It changes everything, Marcus contradicted. And you know it. The sound of approaching troops forced them back to their immediate survival. But as they continued their escape across the barren moon, both knew an irreversible boundary had been crossed. The war between them had shifted to a different battlefield entirely, one where victory and surrender had taken on entirely new meanings. They reached the abandoned mining outpost as Helios rose on the horizon, casting long shadows across the lunar landscape. The facility was little more than a collection of prefabricated structures half buried in regolith, but it offered shelter from both Drav's patrols and the deadly radiation that would soon bathe the surface. The communication array should be in the central hub, Valora said, forcing open a sealed airlock with strength that still surprised Marcus. Inside, Emergency lighting flickered to life, revealing a space long abandoned but largely intact. While Valora searched for the communications equipment, Marcus examined their surroundings. The outpost appeared to be an Astrian listening post disguised as a mining operation, likely used to spy on coalition movements in the sector. "Interesting choice of hideout," he commented. "Your personal knowledge of secret intelligence outposts is impressive for a fleet general." Valora paused her work. "Before commanding the Inexorable, I served in Imperial intelligence. This facility was under my jurisdiction." "So you've been more than a soldier all along." "As have you," she countered. "Your knowledge of our system suggests special operations training, not standard coalition military." They worked in silence for several minutes before Valora stepped back from the console with a satisfied nod. "I've established a secure channel to an ally on the command ship. She'll relay our situation to those loyal to me." "And how many is that?" Marcus asked. "Enough." Valora turned to face him fully. "Admiral Drav has been building a faction opposed to my strategies for months. He believes total war against the coalition is the only path to Astrian dominance. While you believe—" she hesitated. "That there may be room for both our species among the stars." The admission hung between them, heavy with implication. Since their desperate kiss during the escape, neither had mentioned the moment, focusing instead on survival. But now, relatively safe for the moment, the tension between them resurged. "Why didn't you tell me about the bioweapon research earlier?" Marcus asked. "Why the games? The threats against Helios? Would you have believed me without seeing the evidence?" Valora countered. "Or would you have assumed it was Astrian propaganda?" She had a point. Even now, part of him searched for alternative explanations, ways to justify what his people might be doing. "What happens now?" he asked. "My supporters will arrange extraction within 6 hours. Once back aboard the Inexorable, I'll present our alternative strike plan to the Council." She met his gaze steadily. "But I need your decision, Marcus. Will you provide the necessary targeting data for a surgical strike against the bioweapon facility?" It was the question he'd been dreading, the impossible choice between duty and millions of innocent lives. Between the oath he'd sworn to the coalition and the truth he now knew. "If I do this, I need guarantees. No civilian casualties. And—" he hesitated, "asylum for the scientists. They're following orders, just like your soldiers." Valora appeared genuinely surprised by his condition. "Extraction rather than elimination? Drav will call it weakness." "Then we're both weak," Marcus said quietly. "Because I suspect you've been planning this all along, capturing enemy personnel rather than killing them." A small smile played at her lips. "Perhaps I have." The confession shifted something fundamental between them. What had begun as captivity, evolved into reluctant cooperation, and ignited into forbidden attraction now felt like genuine partnership. When Valora stepped closer, Marcus didn't pull away. Her hand traced the line of his jaw, eyes studying him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "You continue to surprise me, human," she murmured. "Marcus," he corrected gently. "If we're going to betray our respective commands together, you should use my name." This time when their lips met, there was no desperate urgency, only deliberate exploration. Her skin was warmer than a human's, the luminescent markings pulsing brighter as his hands traced the contours of her body. They moved together as if choreographed, each anticipating the other's needs without words. Later, lying together on the narrow cot they'd found in the outpost's crew quarters, Marcus stared at the ceiling, conflicted. Beside him, Valoris' breathing had deepened into sleep, one arm draped possessively across his chest. This woman, this alien, had been his enemy, his captor, and now his lover. And tomorrow, he would help her strike against his own people's facility. For the greater good, he told himself. To prevent a war that would consume worlds. Yet doubt gnawed at him. What if there was more to the story? What if the intelligence Valora had shown him was manipulated? Perhaps the facility contained defensive measures against Astrian bioweapons, not offensive capabilities. Carefully, he slipped from beneath her arm and dressed silently. The communication array Valora had repaired could be reconfigured to reach coalition frequencies. He could warn them, give them time to evacuate the facility before the Astrian strike. His fingers moved across the unfamiliar controls, guided by what he'd learned during his captivity. The array hummed to life, scanning for coalition emergency channels. I wondered if you would try this. Valora's voice froze him in place. He turned to find her standing in the doorway, still unclothed, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. I need to be sure, he said simply. I need to hear it from my own people. To his surprise, she made no move to stop him. Make your call, Marcus. Trust must go both ways. The connection established, static crackling through the speakers. Marcus used his emergency authentication codes, waited for verification, then spoke directly to Coalition Command. He asked pointed questions about the Helios facility, carefully phrased to elicit truth without revealing what he knew. The answers chilled him. The defensive explanations crumbled under his persistent questioning until finally, a frustrated colonel admitted it, Project Sunfall was developing targeted pathogenic weapons. The Astrians won't negotiate in good faith, the colonel insisted. This gives us leverage. When the transmission ended, Marcus sat in stunned silence. Valora approached, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry, she said, and he believed her. Your intelligence was correct, he acknowledged, voice hollow. But that doesn't make this easy. It was never meant to be easy. She knelt beside him. War asks impossible things of those who serve. But perhaps we can create something better from this moment. The console beeped, signaling an incoming transmission. Her allies had arranged extraction. In 6 hours, they would return to the inexorable and set in motion a plan that would either begin the path to peace or ignite total war. As they prepared to leave the outpost, Marcus made his decision. He transmitted the precise coordinates Valora would need, along with his analysis of the facility's vulnerabilities. It was treason by any definition, yet somehow it felt like the most honorable action of his military career. Whatever happens, he told her as they watched the extraction vessel descend, I don't regret this. Any of it. Valora's fingers intertwined with his, an intimate gesture that transcended species. Nor do I. But our hardest challenge still awaits. Not everyone wants peace, Marcus. Then we'll have to be more persuasive than those who want war, he replied, squeezing her hand as the shuttle touched down. Together, they stepped forward to meet whatever fate awaited them aboard the Inexorable. The atmosphere in the Inexorable's War Council chamber crackled with tension. Valora stood at the tactical display, outlining her precision strike plan while Marcus waited in the antechamber, surrounded by guards whose loyalty Valora had personally verified. Through the partly open door, he could hear Admiral Drav's objections growing increasingly strident. This is madness, Kresh. You propose risking an elite strike team instead of simply bombarding the facility from orbit? And all because your human pet suggested it? My intelligence asset, Valora corrected coolly, has provided verifiable target data that allows us to neutralize the threat without rendering Helios uninhabitable. Since when does the Empire care about habitability of coalition worlds? Another voice demanded. Since we discovered their bioweapon could mutate to affect our colony on Vega 3, Valora replied. Atmospheric contamination from orbital bombardment could spread the pathogen before it's neutralized. This was a calculated lie, one Marcus and Valora had constructed together. The bioweapon was indeed dangerous, but the risk of mutation was minimal. However, it provided rational self-interest for those Astrians who cared nothing for coalition civilian lives. The debate continued for nearly an hour before the council finally voted. When Valora emerged, her expression revealed nothing, but the subtle pulsing of her markings told Marcus everything. They approved it, he whispered when she reached him. Barely. Drav still commands significant support. She guided him toward her private chambers, dismissing the guards once inside. The strike team launches in 3 hours. Your targeting data has been uploaded, but questions remain about loyalty. Yours or mine? Both. She activated her security protocols before continuing. Drav has requested you undergo limited extraction to verify your information. Marcus tensed. You know what extraction does. I do, which is why I've arranged an alternative. My medical officer will simulate the procedure while you provide verbal confirmation of the data. Her hand rested on his shoulder. It will be convincing enough to satisfy most of the council. But not Drav. No. He wants you broken, both to verify the intelligence and to punish me for what he sees as weakness. Valoris' expression hardened. Which is why I've made other arrangements as well. She revealed that her loyal supporters had prepared a contingency plan, a small stealth craft pre-programmed with escape coordinates, should things go wrong. If Drav makes his move against me, you must leave immediately, she instructed. Take what we know to your coalition. Make them understand the consequences of mutual destruction. Marcus caught her wrist. I'm not leaving without you. You may have no choice. Her free hand traced his cheek with unexpected tenderness. Some battles cannot be won, Marcus. Sometimes survival itself is victory. The mock extraction proceeded as planned. Marcus repeated the targeting information while appearing to be under duress, adding details only someone with coalition clearance could know. The medical officer recorded everything, pronouncing the intelligence valid. As the strike team prepared for deployment, Marcus was permitted to join Valora in the command center, a calculated risk to maintain the pretense that she was still accessing his knowledge. The massive view screens showed Helios growing larger as the inexorable approached optimal position. Everything was proceeding according to plan until emergency alarms blared throughout the ship. Report. Valora demanded. Coalition warships detected, an officer shouted. Multiple vessels decloaking on our flanks. Marcus's heart sank. The transmission he'd sent from the lunar outpost, someone must have traced it, realized his position. Now coalition forces had arrived, misinterpreting the inexorable's approach as the prelude to full-scale invasion. Battle stations, Valora ordered calmly. Raise shields but hold fire. Open a communication channel. Admiral Drav stormed onto the bridge. The human betrayed us. This was a trap all along. He pointed an accusing finger at Marcus. He delayed our attack until coalition reinforcements could arrive. Before Valora could respond, the tactical officer called out, coalition vessels are charging weapons. Evasive maneuvers, Valora commanded. Continue attempting communication. Belay that. Drav shouted. Target their lead vessel and fire. The bridge crew hesitated, caught between conflicting orders from two high-ranking commanders. In that moment of confusion, Marcus acted. He lunged for a nearby console, inputting emergency codes he'd memorized from observing Valoris work. What are you doing? Valora demanded, but made no move to stop him. Preventing a massacre, he answered, fingers flying across the interface. Emergency broadcast on all coalition and Astrian frequencies. His voice echoed throughout not only the inexorable but across every vessel in both fleets. This is Captain Marcus Blackwood of Coalition Special Operations, he began. I am transmitting from the Astrian flagship Inexorable. What follows is classified intelligence concerning Project Sunfall and its Astrian counterpart, Operation Starfall. For the next 3 minutes, as weapons remained charged but unfired, Marcus outlined everything, the bioweapon research, the Astrian plans for planetary bombardment, and the escalating shadow operations that threaten to engulf both civilizations in total war. Neither side's leadership has been forthcoming about these programs, he continued. They pursue mutual destruction while claiming defensive necessity. But there are those on both sides who see another path. He glanced at Valora, who nodded almost imperceptibly. General Valora Kresh has authorized me to offer the following. The Inexorable will stand down all weapon systems and permit a joint coalition Astrian inspection team to verify our claims regarding Project Sunfall. In exchange, coalition forces will allow a similar inspection of suspected Astrian bioweapon facilities in the Perseus sector. Admiral Drav's face contorted with rage. This is treason. Guards, arrest them both. But the security team stood motionless, awaiting Valora's command. The choice is simple, Marcus continued, addressing both fleets. We can destroy each other today, or we can begin the difficult work of understanding our common future among the stars. Tense minutes passed as communications officers on both sides consulted with their respective commands. Finally, the coalition flagship responded, "This is Admiral Helena Reeves. We are willing to establish a temporary ceasefire to investigate these claims." Valora stepped forward. "This is General Kresh. The Inexorable stands down. Prepare to receive your inspection team." She turned to Drav. "Admiral, you will cooperate or face charges of insubordination." Surrounded by officers loyal to Valora, Drav had no choice but to acquiesce, for now. Hours later, as joint inspection teams documented evidence on both sides, Marcus and Valora stood alone in her private observation deck, watching the stars. "We've only bought time," she said quietly. "Drav will rally support." Your Admiral Reeves seemed equally displeased with your revelations. "Time is all we need," Marcus replied. "Once the evidence is public, neither side can easily return to the path of destruction." "You're an optimist," she observed, a hint of amusement in her voice. "And you're not as cynical as you pretend to be." He turned to face her. "What happens to us now?" Valora's luminescent markings pulsed softly in the dimmed light. "By all rights, you should return to your people. I to mine. We will both likely face courts-martial for our actions." "That's not what I asked." Her eyes met his, those amber pinpoints of light somehow warmer than before. "I don't know, Marcus. There is no precedent for this. An Astrian general and a human captain. Finding something worth fighting for beyond their own sides, he finished for her." His hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining in what had become their private gesture of connection. "We could request diplomatic posts. Become the first official liaisons between our species." "Always the optimist," she repeated, but this time with undisguised affection. "Someone has to be." He drew her closer. "Besides, can you imagine the effectiveness of negotiations where the representatives share sleeping quarters?" Valora laughed, a sound that had once seemed so alien but now filled him with warmth. "That would certainly expedite certain diplomatic processes." Their lips met in a kiss that held both passion and promise. Whatever consequences awaited them, whatever challenges the future held, they would face them together, two former enemies who had found in each other something neither had believed possible, a love that transcended the boundaries of worlds and species. As they broke apart, Valora traced the line of his jaw. "I never imagined my war prize would ultimately claim me instead." "Not claim," Marcus corrected gently. "Join. Neither conqueror or conquered, just two people who discovered that some battles are won by surrendering." Beyond the viewport, Coalition and Astrian ships maintained their uneasy proximity, a visual representation of the fragile peace they had initiated. It would take more than one day, more than two people to reshape centuries of mistrust. But as they stood together at the threshold of possibility, both felt the certainty that their private surrender had created the blueprint for something far greater than either had imagined possible. The battle lines of their hearts had been redrawn. Perhaps, in time, the stars themselves would follow suit.